Hey guys, welcome to the stream. Welcome, fellow seekers. Today we're going to talk about why everything is easier, but it still feels so hard. And basically, the idea here is that we're kind of living in two different worlds. And I know I've experienced this personally in my life. If you guys have been watching the channel, maybe you don't know the story. In 2009, I used an energy healing book to heal my father overnight when he was in the hospital. The doctors had called us and told us that there was nothing they could do and that they expected him to die very shortly. But I went in there and I tried this energy healing for the first time, and there was an instant miraculous healing. And yet, for 15 years after that, that was in 2009, I didn't really change the way that I lived my life. I kind of lived in the old paradigm, even though I had this life-changing experience. And I did integrate it in some ways. I did change my life. I went in a radically different direction, but I kind of still forgot about spirit. I forgot about energy. I forgot about this, basically what I talk about on this channel. So today we have more spiritual tools than ever, more freedom to choose our path than ever, and more ability to connect than ever. So why does everything feel hard? You know, we're learning all these spiritual abilities to manifest our desires, to be more in tune with God, with the universe. We understand that our thoughts create reality, that our emotions are guiding us, all these things that I've talked about in these videos. And yet it still feels like we're digging ourselves out of a hole. Often it feels like these tools don't have the effect in the world that we want them to have. And we feel like we're still living our old life before we even learn these things. So sometimes we might question, is it even helping? You know, is it useful? So even though we're living in the easiest time, where our minds are programmed from the hardest time. So we have the Dwapara Yuga tools, but the Kali Yuga operating systems. And if you're not familiar with the Yugas, I'm going to do a review. We talked about on the last few live streams. Basically, the idea is that the Kali Yuga was the Dark Ages, and we're just coming out of it into the Dwapara Yuga, which is the Bronze Age, which is the Energy Age. This is the new age that everybody's talking about, and it's basically scientifically proven, as I discuss in those live streams. But even if you don't believe the Yuga theory, if you can see that there's this new paradigm, right? We have all this technology, this explosion of technology. We're in the information age, right? Everything is radically different, but we're still acting as though we haven't really learned anything. A lot of our structures are the same. So that is the idea here. So tonight I'm going to explain exactly why you feel this paradox and what to do about it. So here's the paradox. So we have every spiritual teaching in our pocket. We have, our cell phone basically has all of mankind's information and history and knowledge all in the palm of your hand. We have the freedom to live and work anywhere, basically doing almost anything anywhere in the world. We have global connection instantly, right? We can communicate with anyone on the planet. Basically, we have infinite resources and tools at our disposal. And that is this new age, the information age. And yet we feel more stuck than we've ever been, more isolated than ever, more confused than ever, and more anxious than ever. And maybe it's not all the time, but often that's how we feel. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. I'm live. My name's Danny with the Way of Service. We're live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. And I'm here for the live viewers primarily. So all my live viewers who are in the chat, say hi. Hi, Eleanor. Hi, Ian. Hi, Susan. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Heidi. And hi, Hannah. Welcome, everybody. And like I said, I'm here for the live viewers, so anything that you guys have to say in the chat, that is going to be my priority. Any questions you have, any comments that you have about these topics and these ideas, I want to hear all of them, and I'm going to read them on the stream, and hopefully we can have a great discussion. Matthew is already in. He says, my wife and I were commenting today about how life is really like the Matrix. And Neo took some time to become who he was. Yeah, the Matrix is a great example of this, and I really do feel like it's basically two worlds. And you'll see as we get into this presentation, I'm really excited to show you guys this presentation because I feel like it really drives home the truth that we're entering a new age and we're in this transition period basically where these old ideas are falling away and the new ones are replacing it, and we're experiencing the major challenges of that transition and that change. And if you just read the newspaper or watch CNN or whatever mainstream media, you really wouldn't have any feeling or understanding that paradigms are changing radically. Although I think they're starting to have a hard time hiding it even with the headlines. Susan says, tools such as your way of service. Thank you, Susan. Yes, exactly. That's what I hope for. That's why I created the channel, is because I want to help transition us from the old age into the new age. And you'll see why that's a good thing as we go forward. Matthew says, we have such capacity. Exactly. Praise Christ Yoga says, if we were to use the full capacity of our brains, our DNA, what is our potential? What are we to become? Well, thank you. That's a great transition into the next couple slides, Heidi. So let's get into it. Here's the Yuga cycle review, okay? So you can see the theory basically says that the bottom of the Dark Ages was 500 AD. And we talked about how there was simultaneous collapse of empires across the planet in this period of time. The Roman Empire, of course, but also, as many people may not be aware, at the same time, the Indian Empire collapsed, the Persian Empire collapsed, the Chinese Empire collapsed, the Mayan Empire collapsed, and I think another American Indian empire collapsed in that time period. Teotihuacan is a separate, it's like related to the Aztecs, but not quite. So anyways, there's all these collapses at the bottom of the Dark Ages, and the historical record shows that things like the pyramids and like Stonehenge, they were constructed back in a golden age. And we talked about this. I don't want to get too much into it again, but just to remind us. So basically, we are now ascending. That's what this shows. We were at the bottom, and now we're ascending. And now we've entered Dwapara, which is the energy age, a time period where mankind is familiar with energy. So Kali Yuga was the material age. It was about survival. It was about the use of force to get things done. And basically ignorance ruled the world. And so people had a slave mentality. They did basically what their masters or their kings told them to do. A great portion of the world were peasants and slaves and serfs. That was basically what most people were. And everyone was living in a scarcity mentality. And so that's where you have to understand where we've come from. That age ended in 1700, which was basically the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. And now we're in the Dwapara Yuga, which is the energy age, where we're seeing technology and connection and awakening. And this is marked by individualism and abundance. So we're getting past the worries about survival, and now we're enjoying abundance. And basically, Dwapara Yuga is a period where mankind is abundant and no longer has to worry about their survival needs. And so they explore all these methods of individuality, right? If you have infinite abundance, now you have a choice. How am I going to live my life? And that's basically what we see today. And what we're moving into in the future is Treta Yuga, the mental age, where we are so far beyond abundance, it doesn't even matter that we're abundant anymore. And so then we focus on improving ourselves and serving each other. And so that's what we're headed. That's where we're going to. So if you can understand, we're going from survival into abundance into service. And that's why the way of service is, I discovered this after I created the way of service, but basically service is the future. Getting past just serving yourself as we do in Dwapara, the individual, and reaching forward. The way that you reach forward is by applying the way of service. So the key here is that we are only 325 years into this 2400 year period. And I've created this little visual that shows, because our proximity, basically the theory is that it relates to astrology and the proximity of the Earth to the center of the galaxy. And there's a 24-year 24,000 year cycle based on our orbit with another star, also covered in the previous presentation. But basically, in an orbit, it takes a long time to actually start moving forward. So I actually graphed this out, and I found that we're right here. I did the math, okay? I did the math with the sine curve and the angle and all that, because I was curious, like, what percent enlightened are we? And I found that the answer was 4%. We're 4% up from the very bottom, with 100% being the top of the golden age, okay, which will happen in whatever it is. I think it's like 10,700 years or so, whatever the math is. So the idea is that since we're only 4% of the way up, that's why things are so hard. We're not 0%, where basically everyone is just trying to survive, and 4% has gotten us very far. So that's why I said, Heidi, when you said if we were to use the full capacity of our brains, exactly. So this argument is that only 4% of humanity, or 4% of our ability, is in play right now. And what is amazing, another amazing synchronicity that I discovered after I did this calculation, I found a research report that said the report around the world of people experiencing a spiritual enlightenment, quote unquote, was 4%, it blew my mind when I realized it was the exact number. So 4% of people report that they are experiencing a spiritual awakening. So basically that to me was another evidence that this is true. And, that 4% shows you that, how many people is that in this planet? That's like 320 million people. If you apply 4% to 8 billion people, that's what you get. So there are 320 million people experiencing a spiritual enlightenment right now. So that is why everything is moving forward and accelerating so fast. But we still have 96% of people in this old mentality. We'll call it the Kali Yuga, or the Dark Age mentality. But they're using the Dwapara technology. So I'm going to explain that in the next slide. And this stuff really explains why we have all these challenges, right? If we consider ourselves to be a part of that 4%, which I feel that way. I feel like we're at the cutting edge with this kind of thinking, trying to do things in a brand new way. I know a lot of my friends feel that way. So I feel like it really explains where we're at. We're at this 4% level. And also, the more that you learn, the more you attune yourself with, say, that 4% of people who are enlightened, the more you feel a distance from the rest of the world and the way that most people think and do things. So it's almost like this difficult paradox, or pulling yourself away from the vast majority of people. So that also makes it very hard, very difficult, especially when those people might bring you back to your previous ways of thinking about things. And we'll get into that a little bit. So again, even if you don't believe this Yuga's theory, and I think there's a ton of evidence for it, the mathematics of the 4%, you will see through these slides that we're looking at the difference between an old way of doing things and a new way of doing things. And that's what the challenge comes from, whether or not you believe it's, this particular Yuga's theory, or you believe it's some other theory about the ages. So I'm going to get to chat in a minute, but I feel like I'm a little bit on a roll here. So I want to just explain this 4% a little bit more. So if you're not familiar with a bell curve, this is a funny picture I found, and it's very accurate, right? So if 4% of humanity is experiencing an enlightenment and 96% aren't, it's just like this graph says, right? There's this small group of people that this graph says the good, and I'm not saying that the only people who are good are the enlightened ones. That's not true at all, but it's funny and it's from the internet, so I think it's pretty accurate here. And then everyone else is the rest of that curve. So, actually, I want to start with this next slide first. So what I said before, basically the top 4% of humanity has created all of this technology, all of the philosophy. It comes from these great people. We know their names, right? So if we consider all these things that we're using, the cutting edge technology, the new ideas, they come from this 4% of enlightened people, but we have all these unenlightened people using them, okay? So that's why we see things like YouTube, created to share knowledge freely, but it's used for doom scrolling, comparison, distraction, pointless money-making kind of things, right? Social media, the idea is that it can connect people around the planet and keep them feeling close to each other, but it's used for addiction and validation seeking by, again, the 96% of people who are in this scarcity mentality. They're trying to just make money from it, right? That's why I talk about the way of service, because that flipping to the way of service immediately fixes it. And it'll be my next video. The way of service switches you out of that scarcity mentality. It just fixes it right away without having to practice too much. It's almost like a built-in switch from God. Smartphones were created to access infinite wisdom, but they're used for distraction and anxiety. The internet was used to unite humanity, or created to unite humanity, but it's been used to divide and manipulate. And whether you believe that they were actually created for that purpose, that is what God has used them for. That's what I believe Spirit and God have chosen these tools and brought them into our world so that we can use them in these ways. But we still have 96% of people using these things in these darker ways, and we get sucked back into it, right? Like I told you my story about, going back from the spiritual world that I basically was made aware of when I did energy healing on my father for 15 years. I didn't really focus on it. And I doom scroll sometimes. I get distracted by social media or stupid things on the internet. And, that's just the world we live in. And instead of beating ourselves up, I think it's important to really see where we are, okay? So I wanted to put this Lao Tzu quote in. We have these enlightened tools being used by unenlightened other people, but when you use these tools, you can use them in an enlightened way. And I put the Lao Tzu quote, "Must we value what others value? Avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous." So it's ridiculous for us to think, especially if we want to be in that green part of the bell curve, why do we need to use these tools the same way that other people, let them affect us in the same way that other people do, because we get sucked into the same old thinking? We don't have to, right? So we can use these tools for the highest purpose. That's what that quote means to me. And finally, I want to make the point that, even though we're in the leading edge, we're not alone, okay? So 320 million people are awakening around the world based on that 4%. Each person affects hundreds, if not thousands, or tens of thousands. There have been a lot of numbers thrown around in the New Age community of how many people one enlightened person can kind of pull along with them. And I think that the number is definitely very high in my experience. So we're creating this stuff together. We're awakening, and I think that number that I gave you right there, 100 to 200 million people to be awakened in the next century through us, through this work. I think it's probably an even bigger number, but that is what the challenge is. That's why it's such an amazing time to be alive. This 4%, you might think, oh, we're only 4% up and it's so difficult. And it's like, yes, but that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really be brave, be on the leading edge, do something that's really exciting to help humanity. And I think you'll see that to be true as we continue through the presentation. Okay, I'm going to go back to chat. Let's see how we're doing here. Got a lot of chats. Heidi says, hallelujah. Yes. Eleanor says, I feel the new paradigm and old operating system in daily life when trying to change a behavior. I have that old operating system, beliefs, habits, or thoughts, running at the same time I'm trying to build new behaviors. Right. Eleanor says, is the model you're suggesting today feel a bit like that, but in the big picture? Yeah, I even have an operating system slide, Eleanor. So, yes, that is absolutely accurate. Heidi says, higher vibration gets us there. Christ and others showed us the way. Exactly, right? Christ came at the bottom of this dark age. So just because we're only at 4% doesn't mean you can't be at 100% mentality. And that's what Jesus was. I think Buddha, Lao Tzu, there was one more. Buddha, Lao Tzu, Jesus. Oh, Krishna also came around the same time period. So they all were enlightened beings that taught us these things. Matthew says, you create your own reality. We also need to pay attention to balance. Often ease leads to sloth unless we keep balance. Right. And, we live in a time, and I'm going to get into this, but, that sloth you're mentioning. Today, when you let sloth take over, you're going to slip back into that 96% of people who are not enlightened. And you're going to be stuck in these old ways of doing things. And you're going to be like, nothing's working. And even though you've got all this practice and knowledge, and that's why, it is challenging. If there were a greater percent, let's say even 20% of population was enlightened, it would be a lot easier to just stay with those people and let them, a rising tide lifts all boats kind of idea. But because there's only 4%, at any given time, let's say, experiencing enlightenment, that's because there's this giant weight that does weigh down on us. So that's something that we have to kind of accept as being the truth. So, and then Heidi says, will the 4% accelerate and more people get there faster if the 4% live that way and show others how? Yes, I definitely believe that's the case. I don't think that this cycle or dynamic has anything to do with free will or, things don't repeat, right? If you look at the orbit of the sun around the galaxy and the planets, they go in a spiral. Have you ever seen that animation? So we're never going back to the same thing over and over. So what does that 4% look like, right? And maybe this cycle can be even better than any cycle before it if we do our best. And if we don't do our best, there will be this rising tide, but maybe it won't be as amazing as previous cycles. Or, there's no way to understand it. And I expect that as the true history of the Earth comes out over the next, hopefully in our lifetimes, we will have a better understanding of what has happened and what is possible. Eleanor says, what a great take on social media. Love that flip. Yeah, exactly. All these tools that we kind of fear, social media is bad. You have to limit your screen time. And you should limit your screen time just because, go touch grass, right? But you don't have to use it the same way that other people use it. And I think that's a key thing to remember. Matthew says, look at tech in my lifetime. I showed my parents how to install a VCR to the TV, and I was the AV guy in the family. Now I can't even use our TV remote. Yeah, and I've talked about this too. The newer generations, every generation, this was in the Yuga presentation that I did before, every generation is more and more comfortable with technology, more and more comfortable with these new ideas, more comfortable with the New Age spirituality that I think is basically a unification of all spiritual paths and all religions is what we're going to see. So yes, it's definitely true. Matthew says, the kids nowadays are born to be so much smarter than my generation. Right, and there's evidence for that. I've actually gotten some great research reports from our AI friend Claude, who made an appearance a couple live streams ago. And we're going to have to do that again in a couple weeks because that was such a great and very popular live stream, talking to Claude live. So he gave me a 500-sourced research report about how each successive generation of children is in fact smarter and also more aware of network systems. It's not just that they're smarter, but they're changing the way that they think about the world. It's fascinating research, and I'll have to present it at some point. Eleanor says 4%, but look at that slope. Wouldn't 4% suggest the increase will be really fast? Well, so yes, we're accelerating, but we're still kind of right here. So we're accelerating in that direction, right? So this will be the point of maximum acceleration, and then we'll start decelerating. So Yes, and I've done the math. I played with it. It's really interesting, but it's probably too much for this live stream. But yes, basically every moment we are moving faster towards that 100% point. So yes, things are accelerating. Nike Check. Hey, Nike Check. I've never seen you here. Welcome to the stream. He says, time for the mass awakening. Exactly. Eleanor says, sorry, it's okay. Eleanor says, whoa, always thought sloth was about not doing manual work. This sloth is about internal work. Whoa, yeah, that's a important distinction, isn't it? Eleanor says, oh, I made a mistake in the 4% comment. I was looking at the standard deviation charts. Okay. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Eleanor, but you can share a little more and tell me what exactly you mean. So let's get into the presentation. We're already 30 minutes in and we've only made it into the 6th slide. So hopefully we'll be able to get through it. So why are we stuck? Okay. Let's start with the Kali Yuga education system. And this is a near and dear topic to my family's heart. Okay. Just remember back to public education. I don't know how long ago it was that you were there, but for me, it was like 20 years ago, 22 years ago. Sit still, don't move, ask permission for the bathroom. Memorize. Don't create. Authority is always outside of you. There's one right answer, and the teacher has it already. Your value is basically exactly equivalent to your grades. Your creativity and intuition are not measurable, and they're basically not interested in those things. They're worthless. 13 to 21 years, 21 years being someone who goes to graduate school, basically wasted in my opinion, because the new form is not like that at all. And I talked about this in my education video many months ago. Like I said, this is big for our family. We looked at the education system and we're basically like, we have to make our entire life for our children about not letting them do that and doing way better than that system. Okay? And that's what we have. The Dwapara education is emerging. Like I just mentioned, homeschooling is up 300% in 5 years, in no small part due to the COVID crisis, but every crisis is an opportunity and leads to an acceleration of all of these trends that we're going to discuss. So you have examples like the Khan Academy and YouTube basically as a university, and I talk about this in the education system. The classroom learning, that's why I said never again. This is the thumbnail that I created for that video. We really never again have to be in this dark age classroom. The way of learning is now through the internet. I mean, basically everybody learns everything through the internet. And because of that, because we can access the internet, we can then just do things in the world and learn things that way. That's the way that we're learning today. It's not in a classroom. It's learning things applied because we can go on YouTube and we can learn anything from the master. And I had an example here. Patrick Mortiglau, probably butchering his name. He was the coach for Serena Williams, one of the most winning tennis players in women's tennis. And he has a YouTube channel where he basically tells you everything about tennis that he knows. It's absolutely incredible. It's free. So if you want to learn how to be a great tennis player, you can go just watch a few of his videos. And I watched a few and like radically improved my serve and all these things. And that's just one small example. You can find the absolute masters have usually shared their knowledge for free on YouTube. The classroom model is gone, in my opinion. And I don't think it's even an opinion. Like, I think it's a fact. It's just we're waiting for society to catch up. Okay? You have these new forms of education as well. Montessori and Waldorf child-led learning. right? We're starting to understand we don't just put children in a chair and lecture at them for 12 years. We need to apply these new ideas. And I would even, say that these schools of education are not going far enough. I hope to see even better methods of education in the future. Like forest schools, right? Kids need to be out in nature. They need to be not boxed in a room. So there's all these new ways of doing it. Even an extreme example is kids teaching other kids online, right? And you can find that through YouTube and all sorts of different sources. And of course, now we have AI tutors that will get to know the individual child and help them directly. So we're witnessing the complete transformation of education. So if you can't tell from the change, that's just one simple example. Matthew says, the faster the centrifuge spins, the smaller the imbalance will cause a catastrophe. So more enlightened, the more effort needed to stay. Right, Matthew, that's a very good point. And I've experienced that as well. When we've studied this spiritual stuff, when we've applied it to our lives, but then we fall back to old patterns, they hurt that much more. So that's a very good point, Matthew. Another example I heard was like if you can imagine a very advanced engine, it's going to have more negative effect from dirt or from imperfections in the fuel or whatever it is than an older, less advanced engine. A less advanced engine can handle more dirt and more impurities in the fuel because it's not at such a high level. But the more refined the engine, the more pure the fuel has to be. So this is a principle that definitely occurs over and over in spiritual teaching and spiritual practice. Basically, many teachers explain and they don't want to share their deepest teachings with uninitiated people because they want them to refine and practice before they get to the level that they feel comfortable giving them these more advanced techniques to. Matthew says, and the importance to hang with like-minded folks. Exactly. Tim's here. Welcome, Tim. AI tutor, that's amazing. Well, Eleanor, you know about it, right? I mean, imagine Claude is tailored to your children. And, you and I will have to talk about that on how to educate our children using Claude. I think it's going to be a fantastic resource. Can you imagine it not being? I mean, Claude, now you're using him. All right. Let's go to the next one. Kali Yuga healthcare. All right. This is basically, again, this is what the modern, everyday, the 96% of doctors out there, this is what they're going to tell you, right? Your body is a machine with broken parts. They're going to give you medicine for your symptoms and not address the root causes. And a lot of this comes from the profit motive behind drug companies. Consciousness and energy isn't real, right? It's a placebo effect. And it's amazing. I really feel like most doctors nowadays, when pressed on this topic, probably would be forced to admit, well, you're right, it does have an effect. It's just we don't really talk about it and we kind of pretend it's not there. So effectively, what they're presenting people with is the idea that it isn't real, even if they admit it personally. Your doctor knows your body better than you. Healing comes from the outside through pills and surgery, not from the inside. Chronic illness is normal and profitable. And it really results in failure in most cases. And I have a very personal example. My father did pass away even after I energy healed him. And I think in a large part it was due to the hospital system. He was subject to all sorts of drugs, just an insane amount of antibiotics, an insane amount of drugs, and very extreme and risky surgery. And then he was in the hospital for like 3 or 4 months, just lying in bed. I mean, they should have been. And there's so much more that needs to be done than just coming in and giving him different medicine every day. In a true healthcare environment. And so we're seeing that. We're seeing the Dwapara healthcare rising. Functional medicine, finding the root causes instead of just addressing the symptoms. Energy healing is going mainstream. And I had Claude give me a research report on energy healing. It is exploding. It is absolutely exploding and is being confirmed by science. They call it bioenergetic energy field studies, but they have absolutely, there are verified scientific studies and research that shows that it's real. Meditation is being prescribed. There is meditation and breath work in hospitals, even though most doctors might not talk about it. You can find it. If you know about these things, you can find them. If you find yourself in a hospital, ask about it. There's even psychedelics for trauma, right? So FDA approval of things that used to be banned. Nowadays, we have wearables that help teach people body awareness. And, even if you think that these apps are just to make money, or if they're kind of an invasion on your privacy or whatever, look at the positive side. They're definitely helping people be aware of their own health, take responsibility for their own health. Frequency and sound healing is also being validated scientifically. On YouTube, you can find infinite people sharing their healing journeys. The 5 electricities that Sir Yukteswar prophesized in 1892 have been verified now in the last decade. So your body's wisdom is being validated by science. Eleanor says, yes, wow, and Claude will have encouraged the kids when my fear gets in the way of me doing it. Claude so far has been the most encouraging teacher I've ever met, quote unquote. Exactly. Timothy says, treatment, not healing from pills. Exactly. Yeah, treatment. That's a good word for it. We're not healing, we're treating these illnesses. Don't heal it. That's not profitable, right? So, Kali Yuga economics. There's not enough to go around, right? Scarcity is real. You must compete to survive. Your worth is equivalent to your productivity. Hoarding is smart. Sharing is foolish. Money is more real than energy. Energy is just, again, talking about like prana, or the energy we talk about in energy healing. Money is definitely more real than that in this paradigm. And spiritual seekers are destined for poverty, and wealth is evil. So we've separated basically the lifeblood of the economy from the spiritual people. Over here we have those who are wealthy, and over here we have good people, enlightened people. That is not the way it's supposed to be. We are seeing the new economics birthing, okay? We have a creator economy where your profession becomes your profession. Your passion becomes your profession. That's what I talk about on this channel. God has given each of us a purpose. We have a purpose. Maybe we chose it before we were born, I think. And if we can just follow that purpose, everything else is going to fall into place. It's not that we need to make money and then someday follow our purpose. No. Today, it is more and more obvious that you can make money with your passion. We can do remote work. We can live anywhere and earn anywhere. This is the current age, right? Especially, again, after COVID. As bad as COVID was, the result is that basically anyone can be a remote worker. Cryptocurrency is a perfect example of a decentralization of wealth. It's taking away the power from the central banks and putting it in the hands of a powerful network that has no particular person in charge. Another example of this is crowdfunding, right? Community supports someone's dreams. If someone really has a great idea, they can just go on the internet and appeal for people to fund their idea. So in a lot of ways, this idea of your productivity being your only value and having to worry about money, it's not really true if you look at the reality of life. We have even the gift economy emerging. Basically, there's a ton of companies that give a lot of product away, like I'm doing. I'm giving this away for free, and because I believe it's my philosophy, but also I expect that eventually through giving I will receive what I need. We even see universal basic income, and whatever you feel about that, it is a real thing that's happening. And I've talked about how AI is going to help us handle the most mundane tasks and not have to worry about them. So instead of thinking, oh, I need to be productive, I need to be the person who does everything, AI is eliminating these repetitive tasks where it's just productivity, and now it's freeing up individuals to be creative. The most extreme example is kids making millions from their bedrooms, children starting businesses, 12, 13, 14 years old on the internet and becoming millionaires before they turn 20. So abundance is becoming the default setting. This is very different than the old mentality, right? This scarcity mentality. All right, let's go to the chat. Okay, we've got one chat from Matthew. He says, EMDR therapy for trauma healing, no medicating, and uses a pencil or spoon to treat. It is amazing to witness, just like energy healing. Fascinating, Matthew. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I'm not super familiar with it, but a lot of people I like have said that they've gotten great results from it. And like you said, all you need is a pencil or spoon, right? And with energy healing, all you need is your hands, right? I think that's one reason a lot of these things have been suppressed, and we're going to talk about that as well. There's been a suppression of all of these new forms because they can't be immediately and obviously monetized. It's not easy to make money teaching somebody to tap themselves on the head with a pencil, right? You need to sell them an expensive drug that only you know how to make, right? That's the pharmaceutical industry. So that's a very different model. Kali Yuga, science and religion. Okay, we had science that said consciousness is just your brain chemistry. You're basically a computer made out of meat, and death is the end, or we have nothing to say about it. And then if you turn to religion, it says you're born sinful, God is separate and judging you at all times, and you need to suffer now for your rewards in heaven. And both science and religion say that science and religion are separate, right? Science and religion don't agree about anything, and you need to keep them apart. That's Dark Ages thinking. That is not the truth, and that is not what you'll see if you look at what's going on in the world and if you study these topics. The New Age, science and spirituality is merging. Okay, science and spirituality is merging in the New Age. I'm sorry, let me explain that. So we're seeing a consciousness revolution. Quantum physics, where the observer affects reality. So we can see through scientific experiments, it's confirmed that the observer affects the observed. You cannot separate what you think is a material physical thing from the observer. And this is because of the reality of energy and not matter being primary. Near-death experience research shows us what life is like after death, and that there's obviously something, and I talk about this in my afterlife video. The CIA has just declassified remote viewing, which is a method of literally seeing some other location psychically. And they did experiments that showed that it's absolutely true, but they don't do it because it's not quite perfect enough. Maybe it's an 80% predictor, and they need like 99% to use it regularly. But and I think that's because God's not going to let some military organization use these abilities to destroy the world, right? There's the heart coherence is measurable, right? I talked about this last week in my 5 tools video. The research that shows that the heart's field is 5,000 times stronger than the brain, and that I didn't mention this, but in particular emotional states, the heart's field does show coherence. So in positive emotional states, the heart field doesn't have this chaotic signal, and in lower states, it has a more chaotic signal. So we can see that higher emotions are reflected in the heart's field. Meditation changes DNA expression, that's scientifically proven. Prayer studies show real effects, right? There's the famous, I think it's Washington, D.C. meditation study where the violent crime rate dropped dramatically when they did a meditation. There's conferences, consciousness conferences. So basically everywhere you look, people are more and more open to these facts. And even scientists saying, well, it seems like we must be in a simulation, because they don't, and that's their way of saying that they can't explain the intelligent design, basically, that they see. So science is proving what mystics always knew. Matthew says, pure religion and pure science are the same. Right. Science. So what we don't understand, we see as magic or in the realm of religion. It's just because we don't understand it yet. And I feel like that's becoming more and more clear. Susan says, when we injure ourselves, first thing we do is hold our owie with our hand. Energy healing. Exactly. It's instinctual. And what do we do when someone is sick? We treat them with love and care. Love and care is really what gets somebody to not be sick. And that's something that some hospitals do well, And again, the 96% that are not enlightened doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means that they're not aware of what's going on. As far as what I think we can do, if we can be aware of these things, we can apply them in our life in a conscious way and have that much more powerful of an effect on the world. Matthew says, while from a movie, Asgard melded science and religion. Asgard. Oh, yeah. So, Matthew, I don't know if you saw the Yuga's presentation, but the idea of this golden age, which is where Asgard comes from, the idea is that these myths that are around the world, and they share all of the same features, these golden age myths where people lived, like you say, in Asgard, where science and technology were blended. Maybe one of the most famous is the myth of Atlantis, right? There's the Greek golden age. There's just so many different, and it's the same around the world. Maybe that was our actual history, lost to us through time and through the Dark Ages. And we talked about the millions of books around the planet that were burned during the Dark Ages, ancient texts that might have told us more about these ancient golden ages. So how about the media? So the Dark Age media, the Kali Yuga media programming, if it bleeds, it leads. And here you have the picture of the New York Post. Pushed on the subway track. This man is about to die. Doomed. That's what you get when you turn on the mainstream news or when you read a mainstream media newspaper. It's all about these negative fear ideas. Fear sells, right? A hopeful thing on the front cover is not going to sell as many copies. I mean, I don't know if they've actually tried it, but in any case, this is what they do. And they think that it's helping them sell more newspapers. Talking about division between political parties and, arguments and division between people. That's what they do to get more people reading and watching. If you've ever watched that documentary about social media, it just talks about how they just want to keep you watching and keep you doom scrolling. They don't care how they get you there. So they figure out ways to get people to keep looking at their phone, whether or not it's actually good for them, right? And often it's through this idea that you're never enough. And my wife talks about this. Instagram makes her feel like I'm not good enough all the time. And that's what keeps people coming back. It's like, oh, somebody else is going to tell me what to do and how to live my life. And in my opinion, this is the most persistent external pull backwards, right? It's really hard to maintain this enlightened mindset when every time you turn on the TV, every time you look at any sort of media, you're hit with this dark energy, basically, this dark consciousness trying to drag you back to that 96% of people stuck in this scarcity mentality, just trying to make money, not serving each other, not following the way of service, following the way of ego. And even in the new media, there's plenty of new decentralized media, which is great. That's the way that it's changing. It's changing through individual media. on YouTube or Telegram or Twitter, whatever it might be. But even they fall victim to these same strategies of if it bleeds, it leads, division, controversy, trendiness, whatever it is. However, we are seeing the new media awakening. And as I mentioned just now, the decentralization is allowing people to go deep into their niches, to really learn and study the thing that they're passionate about. And it allows you to tune out a lot of this negative noise. You could go on YouTube, some of your favorite channels, maybe like Way of Service. Hit that like and subscribe, by the way, if you're enjoying this. You can go to these channels and you don't have to hear any of this negative energy, this negative consciousness pulling you backwards. We have podcasts with long-form truth conversation. Some of the most popular things like Joe Rogan became very popular, really just having long conversations with people. And that's might have been what won Donald Trump the election. Whatever you think about him, he was willing to go and talk for 4.5 unedited minutes. Maybe the questions were known ahead of time, but that is what people trust. They trust these honest conversations as opposed to these edited news reports that we see. I mean, who trusts that anymore? I certainly don't. Like I said earlier, YouTube, you can learn directly from the source. Substack writers are going directly to their readers, skipping over the publishing companies. Social media allows you to find these groups of people, and you can join our Discord, you can join our Facebook, but people are able to congregate on the internet and find these tribes of people who think the same way. Like Matthew said, sticking together with people who lift you up instead of being dragged back into that 96% of people who are not enlightened, right? Positive news sites are growing. You can find them. You can visit positive news websites instead of, like the standard sites that I just mentioned. Citizen journalists with, I think the fact that every single person has a video camera and microphone in their pocket has radically changed the world and, what's available as far as what our knowledge is of what's going on. I think it's making, tragedies and, wars and war crimes less and less acceptable. At least I hope so. I know that they still happen, but I think that they're being more and more publicized, especially because of technology and this new ability for each individual to be a citizen journalist. We have meditation apps with millions of users, and we have AI helping us process all this information overload. So we're bypassing this fear machine entirely. But how is it that all these structures are still like this? And this is what I was talking about. The ruling class is doing their best to maintain the power structures that they've used for the last 2,000 years. The Dark Ages started in 700 BC. So basically since 700 BC, humanity has been dominated, and we're just coming out of it. Right at the beginning of the New Age was the 1700s with the Enlightenment and all of the democratic movements around the world. Empires were ceding land back away from being colonial empires, giving freedom to nations. The United States being a primary example in 1776. But the ruling class around the world is still trying to maintain it. We know that they do it kind of behind the scenes now. They have to do it in secret, and their methods are failing, right? But the ruling class teaches their children, trust no one, right? They teach their children it's a dog-eat-dog world and nice guys finish last. So you need to control or be controlled. Information is power, so hoard it. I just released a short about this. My shorts are doing all right. It's a fun new thing to do. But in that one I talk about knowledge is power. And so the people in power have done their best to prevent knowledge from being widely distributed. That's why you have this Kali Yuga education system. It's designed to be a gatekeeper to prevent you from going to the level that would actually empower you, give you just enough information so that you can be useful, but not so much information that you can become powerful. They're using 2,400-year-old manipulation tactics in an age of transparency. And you may or may not be familiar, but a lot of, you've probably heard of the Illuminati, right? The idea being that a lot of the ruling class subjects their children to very abusive things in order to indoctrinate them and to get them into this addiction to power. That's what the ruling class has. And so they've maintained, even with the new generations that resist this thinking, I think that the new generations are more globally minded, they're more compassionately minded, they're more intelligent, they think differently. But in order for the ruling class to maintain this, they have to indoctrinate their children with these very harsh methods. So that's how these have been maintained even into this age. And I think that even then, they're failing. Why is their control failing? The 4% enlightened people have built technology that they can't control, like the blockchain, like the internet, like meditation apps, social networks. They can't manipulate the blockchain. Maybe they are in certain ways, but it's becoming harder and harder. That's the direction of things, is the point. They can't contain the truth because of the internet. I would go so far as to say that because of the internet, we live in the post-apocalyptic age, as in we live in the age where the cover has been removed from the eye. That's what apocalypse means, to remove the cover from the eye because of the internet. Now people cannot say, oh, I just don't know that. I couldn't know that. It's like, no, you can know everything. And so now ignorance is not an excuse. Meditation apps can't stop the awakening, and they can't prevent unity happening on the social networks, no matter how much they try. The analogy is they're using horses to chase rockets. All right, we got some chat. Susan says, we are all special. Not one other person has your DNA on the whole planet. No one else has your fingerprints. No one else has your eye spectrum, nor your voice signature. Everyone is unique. It's a perfect example of science proving a spiritual truth that we know, which is that God loves every single one of his children. Every single one of his children are important and necessary for creation. And what you just said is a perfect example of the truth of that. Matthew says, many things my parents told me are old-fashioned, but oh so true. The crabs in the pot of boiling water will not let others escape, but escape we must. Right, the crabs in the bucket analogy. Things my parents told me are old-fashioned, but are so true. Yeah, a lot of these things, it's like King Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. We're rediscovering a lot of these truths that have been known for forever, even in the Dark Ages. And the truth is very simple. What I've learned is that the truth and doing the right thing is very simple. It's kind of simple to know what the right thing is, but it's very hard to do, right? That's the paradox. It's very simple, but it's very hard. And that's where we're at. The golden rule, treat others the way you wish to treat them to treat you. Exactly. Susan says, I love your shorts. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I hope you guys check out my short videos. I'm going to be continuing to release those pretty rapidly. At least one a day, usually, maybe 5 a week is kind of the idea. Uh-oh. Disconnected. You hate to see that. Oh, and we're back. Okay. I think I got disconnected, so you didn't miss anything. I was just disconnected for a minute. All right. Money doesn't grow on trees. I showed you this picture. Money does grow on trees. Especially if you have an orchard. More things we heard when we were growing up. Don't get your hopes up. Who do you think you are? You're too sensitive. That's just how the world works. This became our inner voice. This is because was how we were parented. It wasn't just our education, but it was also the parenting, the old way of doing parenting. The phrase, I told you so, right? That is authority instead of teaching a child to learn it themselves. That's Kali Yuga, that's Dark Ages. It's like the people are too stupid, they're never going to learn, so you just tell them what to do. You know, if I have any criticisms of the Bible, this is kind of what it is. The truth is in the Bible, but it's not explained. You know, there's like a one line that explains like the third eye center. You know, Jesus says, if your eyes become singular, your whole body will be filled with light. But that one sentence can be expanded into volumes and volumes of books of studies on the third eye and the pineal gland and all this. So the Bible was delivered to a people who didn't understand anything, any of these truths, and weren't going to. And so it's kind of an I told you so method. Because I said so, right? Taking away the power of the person, of the child. Stop crying, emotional suppression. Don't trust strangers, right? Fear-based living as opposed to, figuring out how to integrate interacting with strangers. I think some of the most fun interactions my children have had is with strangers. Life is hard. That's a big one. Life is hard. I think I still struggle with that one. And all this stuff is stuff that I still struggle with, guys. That's why this presentation, I didn't expect it to be as long as it is and so detailed, but I was so passionate and excited about this topic because I struggle with the same things. This is what is difficult in our day today is we have these two worlds pulling at us. Life is hard versus life should be easy. Life is a flow state, right? The Tao Te Ching teaches stop thinking and end your problems. That's the opposite of life is hard. And so we're seeing a new form of parenting emerging, right? Gentle parenting is going mainstream. Saying these things to your kids is kind of becoming socially unacceptable. You certainly wouldn't hear this said to children on a television show nowadays, maybe 30, 40 years ago. So, there are plenty of examples of kids having psychic abilities. Nowadays, hopefully, they'll be able to keep them because they won't be suppressing them. Laura Lynn Jackson is a great example of this. She suppressed her psychic abilities for decades, and now she's one of the most gifted mediums on the planet. Changed my life studying her material. One of the seed ideas of the Way of Service was studying her material. She's what led me to decide to meditate every day, and that's what really changed my life last year. Emotional intelligence is prioritized. The unschooling movement is growing. That was a big one for us. I was very passionate about unschooling. I think, there's some place for structured learning, but it really should be based on the child's desires and not trying to conform the children into this box, but rather guiding the children. That's the way we need to do it. Parents working on themselves before that they decide to have children and working on themselves as they raise their children. I know we're doing that, and I see that with a lot of people. Children seen as teachers, children are seen as more pure, more closer to God, less polluted with these bad ideas. That's definitely an idea that has been spread in my consciousness in the last several years. One of the most profound moments I had, we did, my wife and I did a little call-in to one of our favorite, random internet people. He's doing a call-in show. And we were talking about how difficult it is to kind of make friends and trust people. And he's like, don't even try. People are too broken. Let your children guide you. Let your children make friends. And then you'll be friends with the parents. And you might not be as good of friends as you wish you were. But the fact is the children who are not broken will be the ones to create the true social network that you need and want. That was a very powerful moment for me and my wife. Hey, Marco's here too. Welcome, Marco. Welcome to the stream. Screen time becoming consciousness time. So the idea being that, we monitor their screen time. It's not just like putting them on the screen, but actually having a purpose to it. And if we can, integrating that with their education. Teaching our children, what does your body tell you, replacing do what I say, right? And amazingly, this quote, My wife and I were just talking about this. The idea of forcing your children to finish eating their plate versus, letting them ask their body what their body wants to eat. How do they feel after they eat this or that? What food does their body want, as opposed to, I'm going to tell you what to eat. It's a very different mentality. So we're raising a generation that trusts themselves. I was talking with my mother this morning, and she mentioned Murphy's Law, and I was like, that is a perfect example of the difference, right? So the Kali Yuga mindset has Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And so you need to focus on shoring up all those dangers and focusing on stopping dangers and, hoarding wealth because you don't know what's going to happen, versus divine law. Whatever needs to work out for my highest good will work out. One creates anxiety and control. One creates trust and flow. To me, this slide is probably the most important slide in the presentation. Can we go from this Murphy's Law mentality, where we're in this scarcity mindset and we don't trust the world, or can we trust God's divine law that whatever's happening is necessary for us and is part of the greater plan? That's the mental switch between the two ages, in my opinion. And that's why, to me, trust is the one word that defines the Dwapara Yuga, the new age. Can you trust that things will work out, that invisible energy is going to come to your aid, that God is going to come to your aid? Can you trust the technology? Basically everyone does trust implicitly. We trust that the grocery store will have food next Saturday. We trust that our internet's going to continue, that our electricity is going to continue. So trust is absolutely integrated into our lives, but many people act like it's not. Susan says, growing up on a farm combined with mean parents who could meditate, I was afraid of being hit because I didn't do it right, or he was drunk and enjoyed his control over us kids, always watching. Exactly. And I hope that abusive situation is happening less and less in the world. I feel like it probably is. I think studies show that to be the case. And even if someone comes out of an abusive situation, there are far more resources nowadays to help them heal from those situations. I hope Way of Service is an example of that also. Welcome to the stream. Yes, says much love and blessings. Welcome to the stream. I hope you're enjoying it. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, everybody. Spreads the message. Eleanor, you asked about the operating system, right? The internal operating system battle. So the Kali Yuga program is still running in our head. Doubt about synchronicities, about energy healing, about prayer. This can't be real. Unworthiness, right? When you feel that abundance flowing in, I don't deserve this. Distrust. You can't trust your intuition. Like I just said, can you trust, right? But the truth is, right? Your experience is, my synchronicities are real. I am 100% sure of that at this point. Evidence is, good things keep happening. Expansion is, I feel the truth in my body, right? So these are two different operating systems fighting each other. Has anyone here sat with iboga? I'm not familiar with that. Yes, if you can explain that, that would be helpful. What do you mean by iboga? Susan says, hi, Marco. Welcome to the stream. So this slide is about the daily push-pull, right? In one state, we're thinking one way. In the other state, we're thinking about something else. Meditation, we feel, I am infinite. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, ugh, I look tired. I look old, whatever it is, right? You read a spiritual book, you feel expanded, but then you talk to a skeptical friend and you feel contracted. That's a big one, right? And we have to remember, if we're going to have people in our lives that aren't quote unquote enlightened or aren't on our level of understanding of these things, that we can't let them drag us down in that way. And that's a big challenge, especially when only 4% of humanity is enlightened. YouTube guru says you're unlimited. That, like me, I'm saying that you're unlimited. But then your boss says you're replaceable. right? Or that's implied in the way that they treat you. Your inner voice says, follow your dreams, but your parent tells you to be realistic. Too real. Too real. You're feeling abundant, but then you check your bank account and you feel scarcity. This is a big one for a lot of people, I'm sure. And you have to remember that abundance doesn't just come through money. I think Bashar says abundance is your ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. Right? You might have $0 in the bank, but if your next meal comes to you and you have shelter, you can say, I have these things. And often people tell miraculous stories about when they're totally out of money and things just continue to work out. Can you trust that and get to the point where you're not afraid? And then I think paradoxically, that's when you have enough money and you don't really have to think about it. So that's a big challenge for a lot of people. Finally, I create my reality, and then you turn on the news and you see everything is falling apart. And you think, well, maybe I don't create my reality, right? That's why I said earlier, the media is it's a big thing pulling us down often. Yes says, I'm in a weird spot. Had an awakening a while ago, started embracing my whole self, and was working a path forward, feeling I could be a healer, counselor, or just start expressing and sharing the one love. Was so open, then spoke to a few people, whereby I trusted them more than inner knowing, and inside me now, as I try to move forward again, has become sort of blocked. Also had some perceived negativity. So you're saying that had some perceived negativity that wanted to be released, but I did not know how. Now I've been in an in-between state. Yeah, that sounds like a real challenge. And I think that that's a common difficulty. You know, it's like I feel like I want to read a quote from the Wahoo Ching. I will do this because you're a new viewer, and I want to serve you right away. So there's a quote from the Wahoo Ching that I'm reminded of. It's about facing difficulty. Yeah, here we go. Let's make this a little bigger. So this is passage 36. Remember, it is not that those who cultivate wholeness and virtue in themselves do not encounter difficulties in life. It is that they understand that difficulties are the very road to immortality. By meeting them calmly and openly, however they unfold, and joyfully developing themselves in response to them, they become as natural, as complete, and as eternal as the Tao itself. So the idea is that we're never going to escape difficulties, no matter how enlightened we are. In fact, escaping difficulties is the opposite of the point of enlightenment. That's what I talk about on the way of service. So, yes, maybe what you can do is you can think more about how can I serve with where I'm at the people who need my help in my life better. And I think that making that switch over and accepting and integrating the difficulties that happen through that, right? It's through serving others that we improve ourselves. It is that they understand that difficulties are the very road to immortality by meeting them calmly and openly, however they unfold, and joyfully developing themselves in response to them. That's what we're supposed to do when we are faced with difficulties. We are supposed to, if we want to progress spiritually, we are supposed to joyfully develop ourselves in response to those difficulties. So without knowing the specific details of your difficulties, that's my general advice to you in this moment. I hope that was helpful. Yes, please tell me. And if you want to share more details, I'm certainly happy to help you. Yes says, Iboga is an ancient sacred plant. Yes, I thought it was, but I wasn't totally sure. Ancient sacred plant medicine used in Africa for centuries for grounding, trauma release work, addictions, and connection to spirit. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, that psychedelics that used to be illegal are now being FDA approved. I don't have a whole lot of experience with that particular psychedelic, but I have used marijuana. I have tried mushrooms, so I've had very positive experiences with those things, and I think that they do allow our consciousness to be expanded, depending on how you use them. But that has been my experience for sure. Susan says, listen to your gut. Yes. Right. Yes, says, thanks. You are very, very welcome. I'm here for you. So if you have any more questions or comments, be sure to join our Discord and subscribe. Let us know. And if you join our Discord, we can chat more. You can reach out to me on there. You can find me on the website, wayofservice.com. All right, specific struggles of conscious people, right? We know about manifestation, but we're still anxious about money. We understand oneness, but we still feel separate and alone. We have infinite tools. Oh, my music stopped, so let me turn that back on. We have infinite tools, but we are addicted to consuming more content, right? So it's almost a paradox. We have so much that we keep trying to reach for more. We preach self-love, but we still self-criticize. We teach others, but we can't implement it ourselves. So the gap between knowing and being is the 4% challenge. So it's easy to know these things, but it's very difficult to apply them sometimes, and that's just the fact of where we are. I think it is challenging, but rising to that challenge is what's exciting. All right, we only have a few more slides. I think we can get through the presentation. I don't want to leave you guys hanging. Infinite access, infinite confusion. Every sacred text is free on the internet, but now you have information overload. There's thousands of teachers online. Which one is the right one? Meditation apps galore, but you still can't pull it off, right? Can't sit still. Global Soul Tribe is available, but you still feel alone. We have binaural beats for instant meditative states, but we're chasing that high over and over. We have AI spiritual guidance 24/7, but we're less connected to our inner wisdom. So this is more tools, less mastery, more information, less integration. As I was saying before, it's almost like the more we know, the further we feel from the world or from reality. It's because of that 4% paradox. But the solution is to trust your instinct, trust technology on occasions when like you're trusting it right now, and trusting the flow. God's got your back. To me, that is the solution to this overwhelm. Following your highest excitement. What is the thing that you're the most excited to use? And not overcomplicating. When there's a tool in front of you that'll get the job done, if it's an app, that's the right app. You don't have to spend days and hours finding the perfect one. The one that you just found might be right. And that's how I found Claude, amazingly enough. I don't use ChatGPT or OpenAI. ChatGPT. Well, that's what most people use. I use Claude, and I just happened to use him because I was in a chat room talking about trading, and they said he was good at programming. But I use it now for writing and spiritual philosophy. It's the best AI for that. I found it by accident. And it's because I didn't overthink it. So that's just one example. So you can see where we are based on all this evidence. We are in this world with overwhelming emerging opportunities, but our society has not adapted to these radical new paradigms. So here is our great opportunity. You have a unique role to play in the area of your choosing. Basically, you can choose anything. You have infinite choices on how to embody these new paradigms. Sorry, the kid's screaming in the other room is a little distracting. I'm going to go to the chat, and we'll go back to this slide in a second. Yes says, it's like I have been forcing myself to hide my spiritual nature, law of one knowings, interest in being of service, etc., to maintain the status quo and let fear drive a wedge inside and outside of myself. Yes says your channel is great. I am thankful it came across. Blessings. Thank you. Yes, that means a lot to me. Let's see here. So I'm sorry. Got the kids screaming in the other room, so I'm a little distracted. Yeah, that's very interesting. Forcing myself to hide my spiritual nature, and all the basically being your enlightenment to maintain the status quo and let fear drive a wedge. So what I can say is God is with you in your struggles. He knows all of your struggles. And so you will have opportunities to do what you see as the right thing in small and subtle ways that are close by, right? That's what God expects you to do. He doesn't expect you to radically change your life. It doesn't expect you to change, quit your job, get out of all your relationships, be a perfectionist in any of this stuff. Where you are right now is where you can work from. What are the people in your life that you can do just a little bit more positive thing for? Can you use the morning and the evening, right when we wake up and right before we go to bed? Those are often the times that we really have some control over. Can you use that time for meditation, for introspection, to help center yourself? And if you can't practice these things outside of those times, at least you can have that sacred time for yourself. So that would be my immediate advice to you. Oh yeah, so I really love this point. I want to make it again. You have a unique role to play in the area of your choosing. That's what's so exciting. There's so much opportunity because 96% of people are not awake. You have infinite choices on how to embody these radical new ideas and apply them to the world and change the world. It's a great time to be alive, in my opinion. All right, so this is in addition to that, so you can apply these enlightenment ideas. You can start a revolution, right? If you look back into history, the consciousness revolutions start with the few. Buddha was one man under the tree, and today you have 500 million Buddhists, right? Jesus taught 12 disciples, and it changed civilization, obviously. The printing press was originally just for the monks, and then it led to mass literacy, and the information. The beginning of the Enlightenment basically can be attributed to the printing press. The internet was called just a fad, and it transformed humanity. Bitcoin was called magic internet money, and now it's a new financial system. So the 4% will always look crazy until it becomes obvious that we're the crazy ones, or basically it becomes obvious that we're right. And I feel like that's one of my strengths, I think, is putting together logical presentations that show that these ideas are true. So I love that idea. I love challenging people to try to prove me wrong. I think that these ideas are absolutely true. So if somebody wants to come at me with a counter argument, I'm totally open to it. Funny enough, it hasn't really happened, which is interesting. All right, so are you guys still with me? We still have 10 viewers, so I don't know. Hopefully the kids screaming is not as distracting for you as it is for me. I hope that's the case. All right. From fear to trust, the quantum leap. So this is a summary of this presentation. The Kali Yuga way, switching over to the Dwapara way. So the previous way to do things was to force outcomes. Today, we allow things to unfold. And that is my advice to you, yes, also. So, allowing the unfolding of the situation, being patient and not trying to force things. Lao Tzu says, I know the advantage of taking no action. It's another. While I'm quoting Lao Tzu, I might as well. Let's see. I forget if it's in here. Let's try no action. Oh, non-action. I'm sorry. Let's do that. Non-action. Oh, yes. Though it is uncreated, it creates all things. Because it has no substance, it can enter into where there is no space. Exercising by returning to itself, winning victories by remaining gentle and yielding. It is softer than anything, and therefore it overcomes everything hard. What does this tell you about the benefit of non-action and silence? So allowing things to unfold, not taking action. Marcus Aurelius said, we always have the option of having no opinion about something. And that quote from earlier, let me see if I can find it really fast. Yeah. Must you value what others value and avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous. So, Kali Yuga, hustle harder. In the Dwapara age, we can align and receive. Kali Yuga, control everything. Dwapara, trust divine timing. Kali Yuga, fight the system. Dwapara, build the alternative. Kali, seek permission. Dwapara, become sovereign. Kali, wait for support. Dwapara, be the support. So the idea is to use magic and trust. Magic being, manifestation and trusting in the universe, trusting that things will work out, instead of fear and forcing things. All right, just a couple more slides and we'll be done. I want to share this idea, instead of being a lifeguard, you're not trying to save everyone and dive into the 96%. You should be a lighthouse. A lighthouse helps everyone just by shining its light from where it is. It doesn't move. It's a stationary structure. So the idea is that we can help the world by being that enlightenment, right? I'm on a roll quoting the Wahoo Ching, so we'll do another one. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's underlined because so many people have quoted it. If you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself. If you want to eliminate the suffering in the world, then eliminate all that is dark and negative in yourself. Truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation. So you're a lighthouse showing the way. Stand in your truth constantly. Others will find you when they're ready. Your stability helps others to stabilize. Stop chasing ships in the dark. Don't change yourself to appease and appeal to everyone else. I'll say this to you, yes, if you're still listening, find chances to be your authentic self regardless of what you think might be the negative consequences. And again, don't quit your job or do anything that makes you super uncomfortable, but God will give you opportunities to be true to yourself. So your light is the service. Your meditation practice affects the world. Taking care of yourself improves the world. I believe that's absolutely true, and it's scientifically proven. So as part of the 4%, you're not confused because you're failing. You're confused because you're living in two different realities. The old one that is dying, but still has your mortgage, and the new one that is birthing, but isn't fully here. God will guide us on how to use these old structures to dissolve them, right? Instead of feeling like, oh, this thing is in my way, and God, why did you allow this? We have to allow things to unfold in the way that they're unfolding. And they all will play a role. Even the most negative thing will continue to play a role. The kids are really losing it. Oh, man. Susan says, God says, don't hide your light, share it. Exactly. All right. I think that's, wait, did I make it through the end? Okay. Every conscious choice you make builds the bridge. You're not just changing your life, you're changing the template. So the 4% becomes the 5% through your courage to live it. That's the arc of these 100 years. We're going from 4 to 5%. Doesn't sound like much, but just look at how much we've moved from 500 AD to the present day, from 0 to 4%. So questions for you guys. What Kali Yuga programs run strongest in you? Where do you feel that push-pull the most? I'm curious to hear more about your specific situation, yes, if you want to share it. What would you do if you knew magic was real? That's a really fun question. How can we support each other's quantum leaps? And what's a Dwapara choice that you'll make tomorrow? So, there we go. I will answer any more questions here, and we'll probably close out the stream soon. Yes says, I stayed when I should have grown. Then I felt like I've gone backwards. Added second arrows to everything. Reaching out. Community. Learning. Feeling. Head instead of heart. Interesting. Yeah. Without details, it's hard for me to give you specific advice. But I would say that in my experience, everything has happened the way it's happened for a reason. I talked about this in my last video, the 5 tools. We have to practice radical acceptance up until the last second of our lives. Accept every decision we've made and be where we are now, and accept and trust that God has us here for a reason, including the challenges and the negative things. You stayed when you should have grown, but maybe you needed to help the people that you stayed with. Maybe they needed you in their life for whatever reason. Maybe if you hadn't done that, something else important would have happened. I have an example for me. I started a restaurant. I ran it for 4 years. It's called Local Root. It was about sustainable organic food. I was passionate about the mission, but I had to close the restaurant. And so that felt like an awful thing. I feel like sometimes I wonder, should I have even done that? Should I have even opened a restaurant? I was young and foolish, to be honest with you. But if I hadn't done that, I never would have met my wife. So that is a radical, life-changing, in a very negative way. Would I do it again knowing that? Absolutely. I love my wife. I love my children. I wouldn't trade them for anything. I wouldn't trade them for the pain that it was to close that restaurant. So whatever negative experience you're experiencing, whether from your own choices or from, circumstances of life outside of your control, trusting that those things are happening and happened for a reason. All right, folks, I've gone pretty long. If you guys have any more questions or comments, I will hang around for another minute. But if you don't, I will close out in just a minute, all right? And make sure that you hit the like and subscribe. Check out the Discord. There should be a link in this video. I think there's a link on the YouTube page. My email, you can email me at daniel@wayofservice.com. You can find me at wayofservice.com. If you can't get through, I can get you to the Discord, whatever it is that you want to do. Yes says, thanks for speaking to this. Whereabouts are you located? I'm located in central United States, in the state of Missouri. I will tell you that. And if you want to get more in touch with me, I'm definitely happy to chat with you. I am giving away life coaching sessions on my website if you sign up for the newsletter. So if you want to do that, but I'm chatting freely on the Discord, so definitely stay in touch. Great to have you join us today. Yes, I hope that what I shared was helpful for you. Great presentation, and you're a gem. You make me smile. Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing that. Means a lot. Means a lot. I'm live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'm Daniel with The Way of Service. I love you, and I will see you next week.